Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for April's edition of the 2017 Educational Webinar Series. My name is Lori and I will be your moderator today. Today's meeting is all about cashing in on what we found to be some of the hottest dining trends based on our knowledge and expertise in this field, titled 10 Hot Topics in Nutrition. Before we get started, I want to go ahead and take you through a couple of housekeeping items. We will be muting you during today's webinar, so you won't have to worry about the background noise wherever you're tuning in from. On your screen, you'll see a small chat box. Please use the chat box to type in any questions you have as we go through the slides today, and at the end of the webinar, we will be able to get them answered. We should have plenty of time for questions, so please don't be shy. Type those questions in that chat box as they pop in your brain. If for any reason the audio goes out during today's webinar, just stay on the line and you will be placed into a lobby and be reconnected once we get that audio connection back up. If you happen to lose the connection on your end, just dial back in and you'll be placed right back into the webinar. And finally, we are recording the webinar today, but we will not be making the slides available as a PDF. The recording will be posted to the MenuTrinfo YouTube channel. But please take notes and ask questions to make sure you can take all of this great information to your brand. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and read our disclaimer in its entirety. The content shown here is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. We are not lawyers and do not claim to be. You are encouraged to verify any and all parts of this presentation with your own brand's legal counsel. MenuTrinfo will not be held responsible for fines or other penalties that arise from recommendations that were made following our best understanding of all published laws and supplemental guidance documents. This webinar contains material protected under international and federal copyright laws and treaties. Any unauthorized reprint or use of any kind of this material is prohibited. No part of this webinar may be reproduced or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic or mechanical, including photocopying, recording, or by any information storage and retrieval system without expressed written permission from MenuTrinfo LLC, the author and publisher. Before we dive into the content of today's webinar, we'd like to give you a little bit of background on our company, MenuTrinfo. MenuTrinfo is a mashup of the words menu, nutrition, information, which describes what we do. We are a full-service nutrition consultant to the industry. We provide nutrition information through our proprietary software and database, as well as allergen identification, gluten-free menu reviews, specialty menu development, and menu labeling consulting. We also have the only ANSI-accredited food allergy training program in the nation through AllerTrain. AllerTrain is the leading food allergy and gluten-free training program for the food service industry. The AllerTrain suite of courses are designed to cater to various food service professionals and settings, including restaurant managers, hourly employees, chefs, university dining halls, university resident advisors, and primary and secondary school staff. Our courses teach food service professionals how to better serve diners with special dietary needs, including food allergies, food intolerances, and celiac disease. Various course delivery options are available, including e-learning, live taught by a certified master trainer, or via live webinar. And finally, a newer branch for us encompasses our gluten-free and food allergy audits called Kitchens with Confidence, and you can go to kitchenswithconfidence.com to learn more about that. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our incredible clients, and we do have a handful of you on the webinar today, so thank you all for joining us. This slide here shows just a few of the incredible brands we have the honor of working with. We want to keep the sales talk here to a minimum, but if after this webinar you are interested in learning more about our services or what our nutrition partnership looks like, please feel free to give us a call. We'll be sending out an email to all the participants today afterwards with our contact information, and we would love to hear from you. So now, with all the housekeeping tasks behind us, let's go ahead and dive into the webinar. Our speaker today is Claire Willis, who is the Director of Nutrition here at MenuTrinfo. She has been with the company for over 4.5 years and has seen the full growth and evolution of menu labeling and other food-related legislation during that time. She has led dozens of menu labeling webinars as well as privately hosted menu labeling workshops by brands across the country. Part of the menu labeling process has been working with clients to improve the nutritional values of their menu items and to meet the demands of an ever-changing public opinion of health and wellness. She looks forward to sharing our top 10 nutrition trends and what you can do as a food service establishment to feed these customers. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Claire.
Great. Thank you, Lori, for the introduction, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So I'm curious if this scenario on this slide sounds familiar to all of you. I'm gluten-free, my son is vegetarian, my husband is avoiding all artificial colors and flavors, and we are all sensitive to MSG and sulfites. What can we eat? This is becoming more and more common with our clients that we work with, that they're getting these very descriptive requests from their customers when it comes to what's in the food and what they're serving. So I want to kick things off with a poll question. If you wouldn't mind typing your answer into that chat box on your screen. I'm curious, what is the hottest food trend that you see at your establishments? What are you being asked about the most from your consumers? We have clean food, gluten-free, we get lots of gluten-free, local food, vegan, paleo, gluten-free, vegan, healthful, ketogenic, organic, gluten-free, vegan, smaller portions. That's a great one, gluten-free. Okay, wonderful. So this is what the NRA has predicted to be the biggest dining trends for 2017. So they focus more on culinary trends than nutrition, but you can see that there's still going to be some overlap here. Looking at number 3, healthful kids meals, number 5, sustainable seafood, number 9, heirloom fruits and vegetables, 14, ancient grains, 16, whole grain items in kids meals, 17, protein-rich grains and seeds. So even though they haven't explicitly called out a nutrition list here, you can still see that it's certainly trending for 2017. So Lori gave a great overview of the different services that we offer, but I want to put the spotlight on one particular service, which is our Nutrition Help Desk. Our partner clients can send us questions and special requests that they're getting from guests, and already having their recipes and ingredients in-house allows us to be the best resource for this information. So we've combed through all of the questions that we've received over the past couple of years, and we've identified the topics that we get asked about the most. And a lot of these were answers that you guys gave, so that's wonderful. Our top 10 list here, number 1, paleo. That was, you guys called that out a couple different times. Fat-friendly, natural and organic, vegan and vegetarian, eating clean, gluten-free, alternative carbs, Mediterranean diet, allergies and sensitivities, and then finally organic and non-GMO. These aren't in any particular order. These are just the big guys that we saw when we were looking through the different questions that our guests get. So we'll go through each of these one by one and go through how to accommodate diners looking for these things. So let's kick things off with paleo. The paleo diet was developed by Dr. Lauren Cordain, and just a small claim to fame, he was a professor in the nutrition department in my alma mater of Colorado State University. The idea behind the paleo diet is to eat the way that our ancestors did. So follow the way of the hunters-gatherers when it comes to our dietary patterns. So this really puts the focus on lean meat, specifically grass-fed and pastured meat, fish, sustainable specifically. So this is some overlap with that NRA list. That was one of the top 20 items that they had. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, and then avoiding processed foods, added sugars, some vegetable oils, there are some exceptions, and then grains and legumes. So if someone comes into your dining establishment and says that they're paleo and asks what they can eat, there are some big things to keep in mind. The first is to think about offering a paleo-friendly cooking oil. So a vegetable oil that's high in omega-3, low in omega-6. Coconut oil is another one that's popular in the paleo community. And animal fat is also allowed on a paleo diet. So maybe beef tallow is something that you can look into if this is a huge request at your establishments. Offering fresh vegetables as a side to replace some of the starchier options is another easy way to accommodate these guests. It's surprising just how offering a few new sides can help you reach a whole new group of consumers. Having a gluten-free menu on hand that's been certified and is trustworthy is extremely important in the paleo community, as this is a gluten-free diet. And then finally, avoiding added sugar or processed ingredients. A big place to look is with your sauces. It's shocking how high the sugar can be in some of those products. So paleo makes for an easy transition into our second topic, which is fat-friendly. So I'm sure that you've seen these headlines on these publications. The Fat Free Craze started back in the 1980s, and fat as a whole, as a nutrient, was demonized, and there was no focus on where the fat was coming from or the quality of the fat. And during this time, where people were generally eating a lower fat diet, Americans didn't become healthier. The rates of obesity and heart disease continued to rise, so that kind of hinted at, hey, this is a little more complicated than we're making it out to be, and maybe we should look into fat a little bit further. So fat certainly has become not the dietary enemy that it used to be. Obviously, with the paleo diet that we just discussed, that's going to be a higher fat diet. The Atkins diet is higher in fat. So when it comes to serving diners that are maybe more in the millennial age group that have seen these headlines and are following the Dr. Oz's and the Dr. Cordains of the world who are saying that fat really isn't that bad, rethinking the use of low-fat and fat-free on your menus is important because they can consider that not a beneficial term, even though that's what you're trying to use it as. And a really interesting development that we've seen over the past couple of years is surrounding coconut. So the daily value for saturated fat is set at 20 grams per day. The American Heart Association actually recommends 13 grams per day for someone who is prone to heart disease or struggling in that aspect. Coconut oil, a tablespoon, has 12 grams of saturated fat, so that's over 50% of your daily value right there. But people are coming out, health promoters are saying that coconut oil really isn't that bad and it can actually be beneficial. They say that the length of the fatty acid chain is what makes it different than other sources of saturated fat, such as whole fat dairy, and it can actually benefit blood cholesterol levels. So the jury's still out on this one. The big health groups like the World Health Organization still limit the intake of saturated fat regardless of source. But something to keep in mind as consumers start to look at the types of fats that you're serving, coconut oil is likely going to become part of that conversation. So following right along with these health-focused trends is natural and organic food. Organic got mentioned quite a few times in our initial poll. So organic food, the National Organic Program is led by the USDA, and they're the ones that develop the standards for organic foods. A common misconception with organic produce, in particular, I'm not sure how this started, but organic crops can be produced with pesticides, just not synthetic pesticides. They cannot be produced with synthetic fertilizers. Sewage sludge, which was surprising to me. I'm not sure how that's being used in any kind of food cultivation, but not allowed in organic. Bioengineering, so GMOs are not allowed, and neither is ionizing radiation. So while organic food is pretty strictly monitored, natural couldn't be more opposite. This is a term that's not defined or regulated. The FDA is currently trying to change this. They're looking into comments that consumers have submitted, what they think natural should mean. And this is a great term to use if you're looking to get sued. I don't think we've seen more lawsuits or more consumer complaints than any other term, the natural. There is it's so subjective what people think natural is and what ingredients should be allowed for something labeled natural that it's not worth it until it's defined. So for consumers that are looking for organic or natural foods, there's obviously that big USDA organic seal to look for. That's the big one for organic food. Again, there's nothing for natural. So if someone comes in and does ask for natural foods, Something that we do with our clients is request a more specific list from them, since their idea of natural might vary from another consumer's idea. So if we know that, oh, okay, we're just looking for artificial colors and flavors, we can identify those for them. But if they're considering all preservatives or all dough conditioners, all these different ingredients to not be natural, that changes our approach there, but we aren't taking any risks with what they want to be eating. Another note on organic and natural is that for seafood, there actually aren't any regulations for organic seafood in the United States. So if you're purchasing organic seafood, chances are it's being imported from other countries. And another note on this is that organic seafood is going to be farm-raised opposed to wild-caught. So again, you'll want to weigh the benefits of that choice, which one would be more appealing to your consumers, which one you're being asked more about when you're making that selection. Okay, so moving right along to another category that focuses heavily on definitions. We're up to topic number 4, which was vegan and vegetarian diners. So by definition, a vegetarian diet is one that excludes all animal products, so meat, poultry, fish, dairy, eggs. However, probably what you're going to see more often are some of these specific vegetarian diets that do allow one or more of those foods in their diet. So ovo-vegetarian allows eggs, lacto-vegetarian, dairy, pescatarian, fish, but not other animal sources. So if we're looking to accommodate a vegetarian diner, there are some obvious steps that we can take to provide better options for those guests. The first one is to offer higher protein grains and seeds. If you remember back to the NRA's top 20 list, this was one of the ones that they had listed. So again, we're having some more overlap there. Adding a vegetarian symbol to your menu can be a really easy way to inform those guests, since vegetarian is a pretty common diet, and you don't have to train your staff or avoid, and you can avoid potential error by having to answer the guest individually each time, opposed to just having it marked on your menu. And then another area, obvious area for substitutions would be tofu or beans for alternative protein sources for dishes that naturally come with meat. And a food group that really gets overlooked oftentimes with a vegetarian diet is cheese. As we started doing more vegan and vegetarian reviews, we really started to realize that cheese is a big a potential area for not looking into it close enough. So in cheese, there are enzymes that are used, and rennet is one of them. Rennet can be derived from bacterial sources or fungal sources, which are vegetarian, but it can oftentimes come from animal sources. And the big deal with rennet is that to obtain it from animal sources, the animal does need to be slaughtered. So having vegetarian cheese, or knowing how to answer guests that ask about vegetarian cheese, because I can pretty much guarantee that this is going to come up if you start promoting vegetarian items. That's a big one to look into. So vegan diners tend to be more strict than vegetarian diners. Again, this excludes all animal products, including dairy, eggs, but is honey and gelatin as well, because those are products that are derived from animals. A big thing to look for with vegan and vegetarian diets, just like with food allergies or food sensitivities, you'll want to watch for cross-contact. So if you're grilling a portobello for a vegetarian sandwich and you didn't properly clean your grill after you grilled a big juicy ribeye, there's going to be some cross-contact there, just like you'd find with allergens. So when in doubt, you'll want to talk to the guest. There's a chance that they might not care that their fries are fried in shared oil as coconut shrimp or chicken tenders, but that should be their choice. So being upfront and letting them know what your practices are in your kitchen and making sure that they're comfortable with what they're eating is very important. So just like this can be a health choice, a moral choice, there are also a handful of religious diets that require at least some level of vegetarianism, and you'll want to respect that with your guest choices. Okay, so topic number 5 might be the one we get asked about the most, and is also probably the most difficult to define, and that's clean eating, and you can see we put clean in quotes. So eating clean, again, is an extremely subjective term and is going to vary from consumer to consumer. But in general, these consumers are looking to avoid processed foods, and they're focused more on the ingredient list than they are the nutrition facts panel. There are quite a few additives that are on their chopping block: preservatives, dough conditioners, colors, flavors, anti-caking agents, stabilizers, thickeners, anything that wouldn't naturally be found in a food. There are tons of establishments that are cashing in on this trend right now. A big one would be Panera. They released their No-No list, which is a pretty comprehensive list of ingredients that they don't allow in any of their food. If you walk into a Panera, you can see that they really promote this, and this is something that they're really proud of, and I think that it's really had good customer appeal as well. And they're not the only ones. There are plenty of other food service establishments that are promoting lack of artificial flavors and colors, lack of preservatives, coming up with their own no-no lists. These are just a small handful of the ones that are doing it. I think this is probably one of the biggest trends in food service right now. Okay, so this is the number one thing that you guys identified in the poll, what you're being asked about, gluten-free. We could not agree more that this one is trending right now. So I know that we have a lot of registered dietitians and even some of our master trainers for our Allertrain suite of courses are on the call. But just basic knowledge, gluten is a protein found in wheat, barley, rye, and crossbreeds of those grains. It can be found obviously in baked goods, but also in soy sauce, certain soups, used as thickeners and sauces. There are a bunch of different places where it can be located. There are a couple different medical reasons why people eat gluten-free. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disease. Gluten intolerance is one where we'll get into sensitivities in a little bit, but it's one where certainly people feel better once they remove gluten from their diet. And then wheat allergy. So all wheat is gluten, but not all gluten is wheat. So someone who has an allergy to wheat, looking for a gluten-free symbol can be beneficial for them, give them a little bit more information as to what they're eating. So in 2013, the FDA issued their final rule on the definition of gluten-free used on food. They didn't specifically say that restaurants would be held to these same standards as retail packaged foods are, but they did say that they would expect restaurants to follow the same standards. So important to know if you're looking to create a gluten-free menu. So falsely labeling something as gluten-free can get you in trouble with the FDA, as this is a defined term. So it's best not to risk it if you aren't 100% sure if something's gluten-free. Again, there are big health implications for guests who are dining out looking for gluten-free options. It's not just because it's kind of a trendy way of eating. Celiac disease, gluten intolerance, wheat allergy, all of these things, it's really serious for those diners. Okay, so staying on the grain train, trend number 7 on our list focuses on alternative carbohydrates. So there are a lot of different reasons why people avoid traditional grains, looking to eliminate refined carbs from their diet. Maybe they're on the Paleo diet, which is gluten-free, FODMAPs, which is a health-related diet. People avoid certain grains. Certainly there's a foodie movement right now where more traditional foods like wheat pasta or white rice aren't quite as exciting as some alternative grains that are becoming a little bit more mainstream right now. These little pictures on this slide are from the Atkins Diet website, which is a diet that focuses on lowering carbs and having higher protein and fat intake. So you can see, obviously, we're avoiding potatoes, we're avoiding buns, we're avoiding traditional pasta, and replacing it with some either vegetable substitutions or some different types of grains. Ancient grains are a big one right now. They're becoming more mainstream as diners are looking for options that aren't wheat-based, rice-based corn. Ancient grains are less altered by selective breeding than other grains that we eat. Say what you will about it. They tend to be higher in fiber, maybe higher in protein, and just a little bit more interesting to those consumers that are following kind of that foodie trend. A big one right now is Papa John's. They came out with a new gluten-free crust which focuses on ancient grains. They're probably the biggest one to do it, but I definitely anticipate this becoming more common as guests become more open to grains like this. So if someone's coming into your establishment and maybe wondering what grain options you have besides traditional pasta or rice, you don't need to jump right into those more obscure grains like teff or spelt, but barley is a nice one, oats, some of these other grains that are a little bit easier to work with, and maybe you can ease your consumers into different grain side dishes. And it can pay off to see what's trending on social media. Those diners, especially the ones with a big following, they really do have an impact on the popularity of certain foods. So it'd be worthwhile doing a little bit of research, particularly with your age bracket, gender, checking into what your consumers like and what they're looking at. Okay, so as we're talking about a more quote-unquote ancient way of eating, we're going to shift our focus here to a Mediterranean diet. And the Mediterranean diet is one that focuses on healthy fats, and so by healthy fats we mean high in omega-3 fatty acids, no trans fats, focuses on whole grains. Certainly this is an area where those ancient grains can come in. Focus on produce, legumes, nuts and seeds, and seafood. And then we're eating less of processed foods, red meat, added sugar, and dairy. And researchers have found that people who eat a Mediterranean-type diet generally have a lower odds of developing heart disease. So there are some big health implications here. So for guests looking to eat a more Mediterranean-type diet, the first place to start is going to be with your cooking oil. So again, looking for options that have a more appealing fatty acid profile. Offering whole grain side dishes, again with those ancient grains, this is a great area to introduce them. Serving seafood instead of red meat. Just a reminder that sustainable seafood was on the NRA's top trends list, so great overlap there. And then featuring fruits and veggies. And I mentioned this on an earlier slide, but side dishes are a really great place to introduce some of these options. You don't have to overhaul all of your main dish offerings, all of your popular options, but just giving a little bit of flexibility in what your guests can order. I think you can see a big payoff there. Okay, number 9, this is an area where we've seen a huge increase over the past several years, and this is with allergies and sensitivities. So an allergy and a sensitivity are not the same thing. An allergy is an immune system reaction to a food, while a sensitivity is a digestive system reaction. Over 15 million Americans have food allergies, and an estimated 10 to 25% have a food sensitivity, but that number could actually be much higher depending on reporting levels. And this is something that must be taken very seriously. Unlike other trending topics on our list that might come and go, food allergies are on the rise, sensitivities are on the rise, and it's something that's definitely here to stay in our food service system. So these are some of the more common food allergies and sensitivities. The allergen list, these are the top 8 allergens as determined by the FDA. So these 8 foods cause over 90% of food allergic reactions in Americans. These are the items that must be labeled on retail food. There currently aren't food allergy labeling requirements for food service establishments, but that's definitely something we could see coming our way in the next couple of years. And sensitivities, these are some of the more common ones: lactose, MSG, sulfites, gluten. I'm surprised by how frequently we get asked about garlic. That's one of the big ones that we identify for our guests, for our clients to tell their guests, but really it could be anything. And the first place to start when you're looking to accommodate diners with sensitivities or food allergies is to know what's in your food. So having ingredient lists for all of your products available, or reliable allergen charts that have been developed by a third party is really going to be helpful for you, especially on a busy Friday night at your restaurant or the lunch rush at your dining hall. If someone comes in and says, "I'm allergic to soy, what can I eat?" having these detailed documents already in place, it's going to be a much more pleasant experience both for you and for the guest. Especially with sensitivities, they might not be life-threatening, but they still should be taken seriously. It could be extremely detrimental for someone to eat something that they're sensitive to, and your establishment probably isn't going to get the best reaction, whether that's a negative Yelp review, just word of mouth in the food allergy community. That could really hurt your business. Being truthful, you never want to guess what's inside a food. You always want to look into it or tell the guest that you don't know. You never want to take a chance when it comes to a food allergy or a sensitivity. And know that the questions will keep coming. This is not one that we see slowing down at all. Consumers are getting more in tune with what makes them feel good when they eat it, what makes them not feel good, and they're expecting a higher level of transparency when they eat out. Okay, and last but certainly not least on our list of top 10 dining trends is non-GMO. This could certainly be classified as the most controversial one on our list. I also think it's the most interesting. So GMO stands for genetically modified organisms, and these are most often plants, and their genome has been altered to produce more beneficial traits. So whether that's increased crop yield, protecting from drought or insects, containing different nutrients. If you all have heard of golden rice, this is rice that produces higher levels of vitamin A, giving it a golden hue. Resistance to certain pesticides, again, talking about controversy, Roundup resistant soybeans and corn, these are ones that probably get the worst rap when it comes to genetically modified organisms. The scientific consensus says that these genetically modified crops are safe to consume. They get reviewed by the FDA before going out into the food supply, but still consumers want labels. There has been a huge shift towards consumers wanting to know if something's genetically modified. If you remember back to, I believe it was last year, Vermont passed a GMO labeling bill where retail foods would need to label if something was produced with genetic engineering, partially produced with genetic engineering, or not. They could voluntarily label it as GMO-free. And right as this was set to go into effect, there was a federal labeling mandate that kind of took it over. So replaced any state labeling, and that's still in the works. So there is no requirement for GMO labeling as of now, but becoming something that consumers are looking for more and more. So there's this misconception that everything can be a genetically modified organism, and that's not the case. The list on the left, those are commercially available genetically modified crops. Corn and soy are obviously a couple of big ones. There are a few new items to the list, Arctic apples. These are apples that can be cut, exposed to air, and won't turn brown as quickly as a regular apple. Genetically modified salmon. This is one where it grows, I guess I don't know the exact numbers, but it grows faster, more quickly than a traditional salmon, so increasing your yield using less resources. And then something called the innate potato, which produces lower acrylamide levels. And if you don't know, acrylamide is a chemical that's produced in certain starchy foods, so such as potatoes, and it's produced when those foods are cooked at a high temperature. So a good example is frying, so French fries at a food service establishment. And the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is run by the World Health Organization, they've classified acrylamide as a probable human carcinogen. So this puts it in the same category as red meat consumption, as well as consuming very hot beverages. Okay, so knowing that list of commercially available GMOs and knowing that it's fairly limited, it really hasn't stopped the industry from slapping a non-GMO label on just about anything. So the picture on the left from Hunt's tomatoes, I think that caused quite a bit of controversy. This sign in the middle of a tomato field saying no GMOs in sight, not saying good or bad, but just saying that tomato products in general, not a commercially available genetically modified tomato, so that doesn't necessarily set them apart, but something that they've chosen to label. Florida's natural orange juice, again, there aren't any strains of genetically modified oranges, so all 100% orange juice is going to be free from GMOs. And then the strangest one is the Himalayan rock pink salt. Salt, it's a mineral, no DNA, so the non-GMO labels not totally necessary there, but again, it's something that consumers want to see, something that they gravitate towards, and something that no one's prohibiting you from classifying that as. And probably the biggest food service story involving GMOs is Chipotle. So if you remember a couple years ago, they came out and said that they have eliminated GMOs wherever possible in their food. It was a big marketing push for them. They certainly got a lot of positive press for it, but then as the dust settled, maybe it wasn't as straightforward as it could have been. They've been hit with a couple of lawsuits from consumers that say that the non-GMO labels are misleading. They still serve fountain drinks that are produced with high fructose corn syrup from genetically modified corn. They can't guarantee that their meat and poultry is fed GMO-free feed. So there have been some growing pains there, but again, it just goes to show that GMOs in the food supply and identifying those, this is just a huge area that consumers are demanding more information. So if we look at accommodating diners who are trying to avoid genetically modified organisms, obviously the first step is reviewing your ingredients. You'll want to look for some sort of GMO verification, whether that's the very popular Non-GMO project, the little butterfly that you see in the grocery store, I'm sure. Pay attention to product labels, see if they do have that non-GMO disclosure on them. And when in doubt, call manufacturers to check on sourcing. If they don't declare it on the package, then they're really the only resource, reliable resource to gather that information. So just like with the rest of the trends, making sure that you have all of the correct information and that you're being fully transparent for these guests is important. Okay, so now that we've wrapped up the top 10 list, I just want to mention, again, trying to keep the sales talk to a minimum, but if your brand is looking for some extra help answering guest questions or meeting the demands of today's consumer, feel free to email us or give us a call, and we'd be happy to talk about your options with our nutrition help desk services. And with that, I'm going to hand things back over to Lori.
Okay, thank you, Claire. We have been making note of all the questions we have received. We've gotten some really good questions, so we'll get to those in just a couple of minutes. But before we do, we wanted to share our next webinar topic with you. So coming your way May 30th is another very important webinar entitled Menu and Recipe Development for Eliminating Big 8 Allergens and Gluten. Food allergens can be hidden in a variety of commonly used products, as Claire mentioned a little bit. Even after receiving proper training to handle food allergies and celiac disease, it can be easy to accidentally overlook products with hidden food allergens. A simple mistake could ultimately cost a food allergic diner their life and ruin the reputation of your business. In this webinar, you'll learn practical tips and techniques from a top chef in the industry for eliminating the top 8 allergens and gluten from your menus and recipes while still offering delicious food. You'll also learn what initial steps to take for developing new menus for your food allergic or gluten-free guests, or how to modify what you already have in place. Our presenter's years of experience in the restaurant industry and passion for keeping food allergic guests safe has translated to building successful food allergy-friendly operations. So we hope you will tune in to learn how you can do the same. And like all of our 2017 educational webinars, this will be approved for one continuing education unit. That's at level 2 through the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. There will be a registration link in the post-meeting email you received today, so you can be sure to register for this next exciting webinar on May 30th. And finally, just to recap before we get into those questions, here are some suggestions that we have after today's webinar. The first is to fill out the survey that will be hitting your email once we sign off here. We do take your comments and criticisms to heart and want to know what we do well and what we can do better, so please hit us with your honest feedback. We do appreciate that. And for those of you on the call who are interested in receiving those continuing education credits from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, that post-meeting email you receive will also contain a completed proof of attendance that you can simply submit to the Academy to redeem those hours. And finally, to stay up with current news, legislation, and more, sign up for our newsletter at menutrinfo.com. With all the potential changes coming to the food industry this year, this will be a great resource for you and your brand. And now at this time, we'd like to go ahead and answer those questions that we've been receiving during today's call. The first question is,
Sure. So this is an ingredient that we get asked about quite a bit. The question is soy lecithin the same as soy? And I believe this is relating to food allergies. To the individual who asked this question, let me know if I'm incorrect. But if you see soy lecithin on an ingredient list, then you do need to mark soy as an allergen. The FDA has exemptions for allergy labeling, but it's just for highly processed oils that come from one of the top 8 allergens. So fully refined soybean oil is void of all protein content, so you don't have to mark it as containing the allergen, but soy lecithin or soy flour, any of the other soy derivatives, chances are there is still protein content there, could still cause a reaction, and you do need to mark it as containing soy.
The next question is, someone asked if you could reiterate how you arrived at the list of these 10 trends.
Sure. So we did not do any market research or anything like that. We just used the questions that we receive as part of our nutrition help desk, gathered all of those over the past several years and looked at what was trending and what we got asked about the most. So again, our nutrition help desk, our partner clients, they may get asked from a consumer, what in your establishment has a clean label, what contains garlic, what contains lactose, what's gluten-free, and they send it our way since we've already gathered their product information and their recipes, and we have all of the resources available to answer that guest. So we just looked at what we'd received over the past couple years to come up with our top 10.
Great. The next question was referring to vegetarian cheese, wanting to know, is this soy-based or dairy-based that contains the rennet?
So this is dairy-based cheese. I don't know enough about cheese production to tell you about the soy cheese, but there are a variety of different enzymes that can be used in cheese production, and rennet is a major one. So I know for sure that it can be used in dairy production, but soy, I'm not positive. That would be one where you'd want to check the ingredient list and maybe go back to the manufacturer to see if they can provide you with more sourcing details.
The next question is gelatin okay for a vegetarian diet?
That's one where I would recommend asking the guests themselves. Again, vegetarianism, it has a definition, but everyone kind of, they might have their own preferred way of eating, or they might allow certain ingredients and disallow others. So for that one, I would recommend, if you have products that contain gelatin, either disclosing those to the guest or asking the guest up front if that's a concern for them, because you don't want to risk it. With gelatin, you also get into religious-based diets where they avoid pork products, since gelatin can be derived from pigs. So that's one where you'll want to get the full detail from the guest, the full story as to maybe why they're asking, and if something would be a concern for them.
Great. The next question is clarifying whether or not organic automatically means non-GMO, and whether non-GMO does not equal organic.
Sure. So organic food, it cannot be produced with transgenic modification. So for some of those GMO crops on the list that we looked at, they're moving genes around. They're maybe taking genes from another species, putting it into one of those ones on the list. So with organic food, you can't use transgenic. There are some other ways of modifying the genetic code of a food that are allowed in organic food, but that gets pretty complicated. If something has the organic seal on it, then obviously it's gone through that vetting process to make sure that it follows all those qualifications. So organic means non-GMO, but non-GMO does not necessarily mean organic. Like with the orange juice and the Hunt's tomatoes products that we looked at, while they aren't produced with genetic modification, that's not guaranteeing that they weren't conventionally grown. So you would want to still look for the organic seal if that's something that your guests are looking for.
Great. Okay, the next question says, I heard from a franchise that they needed food allergy labeling. Is this true?
So food allergy labeling, there's no federal mandate for labeling food allergens at the retail label. However, Lori, maybe you can speak to this a little bit further. There are some areas that are requiring food allergy training. Would you be able to give the folks a little bit more information on that?
Yeah, so there's a few states out there, as well as one county that require food allergy training. The state of Michigan, being one, does require food service establishments to have someone on site at all times that has gone through an approved food allergy training course. So we're happy to say that our Allertrain courses are approved for that, specifically the Allertrain Manager course and also our University course are approved in Michigan. Also, Montgomery County, Maryland recently passed very similar legislation, and both our Allertrain and our Allertrain Light courses have been approved in that county. There are a few other states that do have poster laws, so establishments are required to have food allergy posters on site that are visible to workers in the back, that they can be reminded of the big 8 allergens and emergency protocol for how to handle a food allergic reaction should that happen. If you are interested in any more of those details, feel free to reach out to us, and we'd be happy to give you some more info there.
Great. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we have one final question. This was about citrus insensitivity. They said, what about citric acid?
That is a great question. This is actually, I've heard about citrus sensitivities or citrus allergies quite a few times. I didn't realize that it was so popular. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but again, if you're being asked about citric acid for a specific reason, such as a citrus sensitivity, when in doubt, go back to the consumer. They are probably going to be, they're going to have a stronger knowledge base regarding their sensitivities or their food allergies. So they're obviously a wonderful resource there. And they're the ones that are consuming the food. So obviously you don't want to take any risks by making assumptions with what they can and can't eat. So I would recommend in that instance to go back to the guest and just get some further clarification on exactly what they can and can't eat and what they're looking for you to identify in your food products.
Great. All right, well that about wraps up the webinar today, so thank you all for tuning in. Once again, look for that post-meeting email that will have a link to register for the next webinar, as well as a link to our YouTube channel where you can re-listen to today's webinar if you'd like to. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Thank you.